Welcome back to the Masters of Modern podcast. I am your host, Alex Kessler, here with my co-host of the last forever years, Mr. Ben Bateman is back. It is 2022. It's a new year. It's the sequel to 2020. What up, Ben Bateman? Welcome back.
What's up? I'm so happy to be back. I tried to come back a little too early. We did an episode like a month and a half ago or something like that. But I'm just over 9 weeks now recovered. You guys are hearing this in probably about 10 weeks recovered, and I'm doing all right. It's a slow burn. I hate to say it, but I'm on my feet doing stuff, and I'm very excited to be back. I missed the show. I definitely missed the show. And the good news is I am now able to actually do this without harming myself. So thanks for being patient, and a big round of applause for Mr. Kessler for manning the fort, keeping the steering wheel, the boat in the water.
It was really all of our guests. They gave the 210%. I just showed up, talked to them about their lives. They did a great job. Really excited to have you back, though. For audio listeners only, Ben actually now has like a cybernetic back coming out. There's like blinking red lights coming out from his shoulders.
I was actually near playing the role of Cable in Deadpool 2.
Yeah. Half of his body is now cybernetic implants. But we're glad to have you back. Don't hunt us down like the Terminator.
I will not. It is 2022, as you mentioned, and I'm definitely excited that it's 2022. Do you have any really big things other than the one gigantic thing in 2022 that you're really excited about doing, or like that you're just like a 2022 resolution that you've already decided on?
Resolution? No resolutions. My resolution is to successfly have a child and then keep it alive.
Thing I was referring to.
I am very excited about the world of going to New York Toy Fair. We have Battle Bosses is out now. If you were a Patreon, we have finally sent out the deluxe edition, so Battle Bosses is now just for sale starting in 2021. If you go to our website, battlebosses.com, you can buy it, which is a game I made that's dope and recommend it. The fact that it's out in the world finally is really cool. The fact that I am having a child, that there will be a little miniature me that'll be like this big and then slowly get bigger from there is weird. Those are my 2022 goals starting today.
Battle Bosses and a baby. I think it's those are good goals. I think
cookie dough. Eat more cookie dough. Just
eat more cookie dough. That's exciting, man. I think it's wild that we've done this show for as long as we have, and now we're going to be those podcasters where we grew up on the podcast. There's going to be a childbirth.
You could do a little take snippets from every episode, showing us gradually grow older throughout the years.
Exactly. Well, that's exciting. I'm definitely looking forward to 2022. It's going to be a fun year. I can't wait to start playing Magic in stores again. I know we're around the corner, as you mentioned, from Toy Fair. I'm not just excited to be able to, safely and consistently have places to go play Magic with strangers again, something that I really miss doing. And I'm also very excited for, obviously, the tour that I was supposed to go on had to get postponed, as did the album release, but both things are going to be happening in the spring and the summer. The EP coming out in April, and the tour, probably June, July, maybe August, will be rescheduled. So that's all going to be awesome. I actually just hit 75,000 streams on Spotify today.
Nice.
You guys are hearing this a couple days later. But yeah, it's kind of crazy, right? It's been 8 months. It kind of was like a little passion project I wanted to do, something I was definitely excited about, but people actually supported it. And then it'll get to be announced at some point, soon, but there's I have a song that something really cool is happening with very soon that I'll be able to talk about on the podcast when it happens officially. I just don't really know what I'm allowed to do, but cool. It was a nice feather in the cap of recently. So
yeah. Congratulations. Yeah. That's awesome.
Thank you.
So enough about us, more about Magic the Gathering. As the premier Masters of Modern podcast, we are talking today about our favorite cards from every set from last year. So this is going to be a little bit of a recap of 2021. What we think not the best cards, but our favorite cards in Modern are from each set. We'll talk about our vibes on each set in general, a little bit of a year in review. But before we get into that, I do want to thank our patrons. Thank you, patrons. You're the reason this podcast can happen. It's like the support you guys give the podcast, helping us pay for Rick and Marshall to make sure the podcasts are edited. You get all the card files. The audio sounds good for audio listeners is just extraordinarily appreciated. And if anyone who is listening has it in them, they donate anything from $1 to $5 to $10. We would super appreciate it. You do get some cool early access stuff. So you get the full episode about a week early. So you get week early raw access, which is also like no editing from the perspective of like all of the swearing that we do, all of the like tangents that we go down if we say something just like wrong, and then Ben like halfway through have to like, Ben, solitude has flash, you should say that. You get to hear all those mistakes, plus we do an extra 15 minutes of pre-show at the beginning of every episode that is exclusive and will only ever be on Patreon. So if you want to hear some of that cool stuff, it is all there on Patreon. And thank you again to patrons. You are heroes among heroes, and
nobles of House Modern. We thank you,
nobles of House Modern. And also, if you check out below, if you're going to go buy anything on TCG Player, just make sure to click the link from us beforehand, because we do get some amount of kickback for that, and that also does definitely help the podcast, and we appreciate that as well. All right. It's January 2021, almost exactly a year ago. It's cold. There's Vikings. Tybalt has maybe grabbed a sword and ripped a hole into reality, allowing Vorniclix to show up to get some tree sap. Kaya's got battle axes. We're on Kaldheim. Yeah. So I guess first off is now that we're like a year out, how do you feel about Kaldheim?
So I'm going to say this. I'll say it now once, and I know that I'll end up touching on this a bit more as we get through the year. But overall, it's not my favorite year of Magic sets. I don't think that I would characterize any of these sets as particularly bad sets. Like, there are bad sets in Magic's history. It'll have to be a little more time before I really would determine that any of these sets aren't good. But I don't have like a great deal of affection on the whole for some of the sets this year. Like, there's a lot of stuff that I think in concept when we were doing the previews was like, oh, there's a lot of text, or like, this is kind of confusing, or there's a lot going on here. And I don't feel like most of those concerns actually ended up being unfounded. So I have cards for sure, and we'll talk about our favorite of each one, because like, I definitely have cards from each set that I really love, because they're like in every set, even if it's not your favorite, there's still always going to be cards that stand out.
Yeah.
But I do think that on the whole, when I look back, like, there are just like little things that I guess I wish I got out of each set. And it's funny, the card that I picked out of Kaldheim to share, it's not even really a card that I think is particularly exciting for Modern. There's a Modern card that I could have picked, but I'll bet you picked it. So I'm hoping you did.
I think I did.
Really?
Yeah, go. Speak your piece.
I chose this card, Magda Brazen Outlaw. Remember this card?
No, Magda's dope. Magda's a lot of play. Not in Modern, but like in Magic.
Yeah, and
I could see play in Modern. Like, the more treasure mechanics that get made, the more likely it is that we get like a cheat dragon artifact thing into play.
Well, that's why I like Magda so much. What I found in playing Magda, I tried to brew with Magda quite a bit when the card first came out. There's not quite an efficient enough way to keep it alive and fill up on treasures. Like, it's trying to do a couple too many things at once to be able to go turbo just yet in Modern. But I did find that it found its way into cute deck lists. And then I definitely found that in Commander, when we played, this card was a house. The inevitability of this card is what makes it so good. The fact that it's a tribal lord that also allows you to do something savage if you just like let it stick around for just long enough, I think is what I like so much about it. And that's why I think eventually in Modern, this card actually will be good. I think that eventually there will just be enough synergy with things getting treasures early enough that you'll be able to do something massive. But I definitely just enjoy this card on the whole. I think it's exactly the kind of thing where I could see this exact card being a 3/2 for 3, and it would be so much worse. But the fact that it's a 2/1 for 2, that it also is a lord, that then also has this extra thing, it just means the more dwarves we get, the more treasures we get, the longer we go, the more likely it is this card's going to be bonkers. And I've had so much fun playing it that I think it stood out to me more than any of the other cards. I almost chose Valky, but I like this card way more.
Yeah. And Valky, like, what's interesting about Valky and Tybalt Trickery, and what's interesting about Kaldheim in general, is they like, on 2 different cards, they had to ban one and they had to change the rules along another one, right? Like, the way that Cascade interacts with filled cards Trickery had to change, and Tybalt's Trickery just in general was banned in a bunch of formats. To me, makes it definitely like a statement on power level. So like that's kind of like an interesting point, right? Like this year, as far as power level goes, definitely seems a lot more depreciated than the last few years. But on the other hand, other than Modern Horizons 2, but on the other hand, like that's maybe not a bad thing, right? Like I think I don't hate that like a lot of these sets are a lot more role players and niche cards versus like just powerhouse after powerhouse that warped every format that got printed. And the fact that Kaldheim was kind of the end of that like banning cycle that lasted from War of the Spark is interesting. That like Strixhaven, you know, when you actually look at the Strixhaven cards that were printed, none of them are worth very much or seemed very powerful. Now the worth is different because they had the Mystical Archive in them, so it's a little suspect. But still, like it's not known for its power level, and neither was the D&D set. Neither really were Midnight Hunt or Crimson Veil. But yeah, I think for me, Kaldheim, I actually have, so I like leaned into like my favorite cards. And often I've leaned towards like what I thought were most interesting, not necessarily most powerful in Modern. Because I think there's 2 cards that were banned out of Kaldheim in Modern, and those are probably the best. There's also stuff like Masked Vandal that'll just like be a role player forever. But my pick is Maskwood Nexus. The like all all creatures are all things, you can make a token. I think that card like allows a lot of really cool lines of play. It invents a whole bunch of different archetypes. The more cool tribal cards are printed, the more likely it gets more broken in half. And just I think is like a really cool card that like has opened up a lot of just different deck play styles.
Yeah, I remember this was definitely one of the cards we talked about in our preview episode. It definitely was a card that we were both pretty excited about. It's definitely very, very cool. I definitely think that lots and lots and lots of things have tried to go back to the Mistform Ultimus original templating of every creature type. You know, obviously we had Changeling get introduced, and then there's been a whole number of different things that have gone down that road, shapeshifters and whatnot. But, you know, this is not going to be a modern powerhouse card, obviously. This is just going to be like a uniquely cool card and a very fun card. But the fact...
I don't know if I agree, though. I think it does have the potential to see real Modern play. Like, the moment that there's a card that is good that makes it worth playing this that goes infinite. Like the thing with Maskwood Nexus is just like accidentally goes infinite with a bunch of cards. Now most of those cards are 6 drops or like on the expensive side, but the moment they print like a 3/1 that whenever a bird enters the battlefield create a spirit token.
Well, so there was, remember that black card from Mercadian Masks that was then in Time Spiral Conspiracy, black. I always loved Conspiracy, and I like always wanted to try to find ways to break Conspiracy, right? But it's double black and it's a 5-drop. This is just a much better version of that card. Like,
well, there's like the blue one, right? There's a 3-drop blue one, but this one's that the fact that this affects things that aren't on the battlefield and creature spell cards also has like specific, like it works slightly differently than Conspiracy does. It's like the most powerful version of Conspiracy, and it's colorless and it's modern legal.
That's what I was going to say. It's the fact that, well, so is Conspiracy, but the fact that it's modern legal is
Conspiracy is not colorless.
This is colorless. Conspiracy is black. Conspiracy is modern legal because it was time shifted. This card is colorless,
sure.
Which is what makes it ultimately, in my opinion, as well as costing 1 less. But the fact that it's colorless is the thing that really makes it a bonkers good card, because it allows you to pull from literally any tribal idea you could possibly have in any color. And then just this card just fits with whatever that the idea is.
It also isn't a dead card draw. Like if I play this and they're able to like answer my combo piece, I now have a 2/2 changeling every turn, right? Like I still have the ability to do stuff as the game goes on. So I think this card's better than not. I think this card is modern playable in the long run. How it's played, what does that look like? I don't know. There's also, you know, there's Adaptive Mutation, I think is the other one, and Xenograph are the other 2 versions of Conspiracy. So there's like 4 versions of this card, and those 2 are also in modern, and those just don't do anything else, and they're blue. So I think it even being colorless is really helpful. I might have said the wrong cards there, and I am very thankful of our editors for putting the right cards in front of us.
Wrong cards?
Yeah.
Never.
All right. So as far as Kaldheim itself goes, to me, I really like the theme. I like it. Norse mythology is not like, other than just like Thor from Marvel, I have not done, it was never been like a big thing for me. And like, you know, as far as other modern cards, like Toski is another card from that set that like has seen real modern play. And I think there's like, it has a lot more depth than maybe even some of the other sets this year. It's definitely not my favorite theme wise, but it's cool. Like Snow was back. I'm kind of really sick of Snow now that it's gone through its experiences. But yeah, so the next set
Well, I do want to say really quick before we move on
Yeah.
from Kaldheim. Yeah, I mean, I think like what I said a second ago, I didn't want to start the episode like a downer. I think I just wanted to be like sort of honest about it because I feel like it's important if anybody who's a fan of this show had a similar feeling, they could relate to it. And I just think that the thing I noticed when I remember us doing the spoilers for the set was like, there's a lot of double-sided cards. A lot of these double-sided cards have a huge amount of text. It takes me forever to read these. It's so many new cards, and it feels like, and I realize that it's not like we're getting that many more new cards that are standard legal, but between the Commander product and the fact that we have as many expansions as we have now, plus premium sets, there's just so many cards now that when you give me a set that has that kind of text and two sides to it, it's overwhelming. When you give me multiple new mechanics with tons of text in multiple sets, so this just kind of was a taste of things to come. And I think that, every generation of Magic design evolves and changes, and there's only so much you can do with very basic templating. Like you just at a certain point you run out, and you have to start making it more interesting, coming up with new ideas. But I do think that with Kaldheim, that was the first thing I noticed, and it was one of the big takeaways for me looking back on it. It's hard for me to keep some of the cards straight, to be honest with you.
Fair.
Some of the flip cards.
So the next set, we went to Wizard School, Strixhaven, School of Mages. I was just like all types of hypes for this plane. I still really love Strixhaven. Big fan of like revisiting each of the enemy color combos and trying to do them in a different way. Not all of them they did like the best job of differentiating, but I do think for the most part they did a pretty good job, especially once you got to play with them. They felt more different than maybe they even did during preview season. I really loved Learn as a mechanic. I thought that was really cool, and like a sign that Wizards is willing to play in spaces that they hadn't played before, which I continue to enjoy. And yeah, what are your thoughts on Strixhaven?
This is probably my favorite of the standard expansions. I really like Strixhaven. The power level's low, which is funky. It's kind of funky looking back at all the cards because it's like a bunch of medium powered cards that I have a great deal of affection for, which is similar to a lot of older sets. Actually, that's how I feel about a lot of older sets. Like we did Time Spiral Remastered this year, which we didn't pick cards from because it was all reprints, but if you look at Time Spiral Remastered, it's a lot of extremely medium powered cards. It's actually not that many traditionally powerhouses. Like there's a handful of really good cards, but mostly it's like stuff that feels a lot more like Strixhaven. And there's something charming about that for me. This had my favorite card that I played, I think, or at least the new card that I probably played the most. And that's the card that I picked, which if you follow our streams or any of the stuff we do, you probably know already. Shall I reveal my card?
Sure.
I chose Galazeth Prismari. That was the card. I played that card a lot. I think the design on that card is super, super cool. I like the idea of like a wizard dragon sort of thing that's able to use treasure to cast spells. The stats on it are already pretty decent anyway. The fact that it's a 3/4 flyer for 4 that immediately makes you a treasure token, but then comes down and much like one of my old favorites, Grand Architect, now allows all of the artifacts that you already have on the battlefield to just create mana. All of them. Every one of them just means your ability to, and I mean, obviously it's only to cast instant or sorcery spells, but like this is a really good card for control decks.
Sure.
It's a really interesting card for control decks. Traditionally, blue-red is not the place that people like lean into for like the hard control. Blue-white is where they lean more. It used to be like you'd see more of it, but blue-red is often used in modern. It's like more of a tempo or kind of like a blitz aggro type of color combination, like utilizing cheap spells. But I mean, I just think about this card as like this to me represents exactly that middle point of where you want to be with like a blue control finisher, because of it coming down, allowing all of your artifacts that you have down already to now just like act as I can cast my counter spells. I can do all of the other things that I want to. I can tap out on turn 4 as long as I have the right things down already. I just think it's a really cool card. And I played this in Commander as well, which is where I got most familiar with it. But I do think that this card is one of the few actually pretty pushed cards in Strixhaven.
Yeah, I feel like that's fair. Yeah, I think Strixhaven has a lot of gems that in the long run are going to be looked upon like really fondly. I think there's like some really good cards in that set that like right now, because of the Mystical Archive, which is one of the coolest things they did all year, like none of the prices are very high. Right, like I like the red white flip card that's like a 2/1 first strike, or the backside is a silence effect for 2. Like that's these CDH play like pretty regularly. You have the black green Dean, the one black one that's like a playable modern card. You have like first class, right? Like the fact that Learn has all the looting effects, and the fact that first class sees modern play is like something that's pretty cool and significant, I think. My favorite card, like I actually agree though. I think like actually my favorite card of the year is a Strixhaven card, and it's Plarg.
Yeah, you
and
love
it's just
Plarg.
like it's like such a cool like as a character, he's dope. He's the Dean of Chaos. Like he's this like orc, and it's like, oh there's like fire everywhere. But also just like, you know, I like Jace Finch Prodigy. Plarg has a lot of those vibes. Discarding first is sometimes better, especially when you're working with dredge cards. He like the backside of Augustus is always a decent backup plan. The card is just really cool. Love it in Commander. Love it in this. I've really enjoyed the card. And I do think it has modern play potential, right? Like a 2-mana loot on the front end that then can cascade into cascade spells has like potential to do something. And Augustus does have infinite combo potential. So like both of them being somewhat playable in that sense, I think is really interesting. Yeah, I've really enjoyed Plarg in general, but like I think Strixhaven in general just was really impressive. I think it's my favorite set of the year as well. Outside, like it's that or Midnight Hunt are like really in contention for favorite. It's one or the other, and I would probably pick Strixhaven over the third time we were at Innistrad, because I do think I'm a little more disappointed with this return to Innistrad than the last 2 times, though that could change also as time goes on.
Yeah, I would agree. I think Strixhaven was everything I wanted it to be when we got it previewed in the first place, and we all wondered what was going to happen with it. It really turned out to be what I hoped. I think I wish that in each of the cases, like the types, like for instance, the commands, like I wish that we just got a full set of bangers as opposed to like what I think we got, which was like a couple really good ones, and then a few like we always get with commands.
We've never gotten a cycle of 100% bangers. Like the original 5, maybe the red one was the only like unplayable one, but like in modern,
I get it. I'm not saying that we usually get a set of bangers. I'm saying like it was the thing I was the most excited about, and I think they could have just done that. Like there's almost no reason not to. Like it's such an exciting piece of Magic that when you look back, like, that this was enemy colored commands that we're getting.
I think they did a better job on these commands though than they did on the allied ones, the Dragons of Darkir ones.
Because the Dragons Dark Hero ones only have like one good one.
Well, I think the blue and the blue ones are just like, well, like the problem with the Dragons of Darkir ones is that Cryptic Command was too good. Like it was over the line in power level that they like were really afraid of the blue black one and the blue white one being very good. And they put more of that energy in the red black one, the red green one, and the green white one for standard. And in this case, it just ended up that the blue red one was the best one because they just kind of recreated Gulligan's Command. And then the green black one was probably the second best, which like the one thing I will agree is that there's an argument to be made that green black and blue red are the best 2 color combos in Magic, and the fact that the commands for both of those 2 color combos were also just the best ones is, you know, a little medium. I do wish the Boros one was was better, but it wasn't, and here we are.
Yeah, I mean
Lorehold.
If I remember correctly, the black green one wasn't it like a sorcery speed card? It's like the only one that was a sorcery, and all the rest were instants.
I think there were other sorceries, but Witherbloom Command was a sorcery. Target player. The black white one was also a sorcery, and that was the problem with the black white one.
Yeah, well, in any case, overall, I think Strixhaven was awesome.
Yeah.
It's unsurprising that a set that has an instant speed blue-red command that costs 3 is going to be my favorite set of the year. Like, well, other than Horizon.
I also think like Prismari is more Ben Bateman as Lorehold is more Alex Kessler than Izzet is.
Yeah, I think it's fair.
Like you are a musician, you are an entertainment movie entertainer person, right? Like Prismari is about that in a blue-red way, which is also your 2 color combo versus like Izzet, which like you're not a scientist. No offense.
I'm not a scientist. How dare you say so?
Everyone in the comments, let me know if you think Ben is a scientist. What type of scientist, what field of study in science is Ben? If he was a professor on Is It, what type of way is he exploding people?
What's the Mark Wahlberg's quote in the Transformers movie? I'm an inventor.
Oh, I don't know. All right. So the next set is a doozy. We're at Modern Horizons 2.
So this one's weird because if neither one of us was to pick the big hitter, it would feel totally disingenuous to the set.
I don't agree, because my point was favorite. I did say what is your favorite card, not what the best card is, because the best card is Ragavan. And then Urza Saga is maybe arguable is the best card. Like, you can maybe argue it's Urza Saga and not Ragavan. It's like between the two of them, right? And then then you get into like the mid tier, which like there's just a library of some of the most powerful cards in the entire format. I did put my favorite. I did not put any of the cards I just said.
Okay, gotcha. I picked Ragavan. I picked Ragavan because
he's also
there's a couple other cards that I like almost picked. There's like a few cards that I like really considered picking that I think are valid, that I really enjoy. One in particular that I wonder if it's yours, actually. I'll bet you it is. I'm glad I didn't pick it. Ragavan, when we previewed the set, I lost my mind over. And then 3 days later or 4 days later, I remember like that was the consensus. Like I'm sure that was already the consensus. I just hadn't seen everyone's consensus yet. And then it became the dominant card that it is. But the reason it's dominant, and the reason that I loved it then, and the reason I still love it, is that card does everything I want out of a Magic card. Like that card is designed, when you and I talk about like the style of play that we have, like the cards that we like, that card is everything I like in a Magic card. It costs 1. It's an aggressive threat that provides me utility, that draws me cards. Like it's designed, right? The only difference is if it was like a 1/1 flyer that was blue instead of a 2/1 creature on the ground. It's probably the only difference. Like, and it would be even. I mean, that would be better. What?
Yeah, is that worse or better? It would be better.
It'd be better just because it's evasive and it can be blocked by a 1/1. And you don't care about 2 damage versus 1. I mean, I guess you do in some decks, but like you care about the fact that you can create
it's
mana.
Definitely.
And draw cards.
I don't know what's better.
Yeah,
it's an interesting dilemma.
It's basically this card was like tailor made for everything I love about Magic, and so it's funny that it became really good and is the most dominant card in the format and in the set. But it's also just my favorite card. I mean, there's a lot of cards I like in the set, but this is my favorite one.
That's fair.
So I don't feel guilty in saying it.
Yeah, I think like, we've spent a lot of time this year talking about Modern Horizons. We've talked about how it's affected the format. We've talked about how it's been in general a benefit from a variety of gameplay option perspective and the different powerful strategies that are available. It's opened the format up in the first time in basically since Modern Horizons 1. On the other hand, it the top 30 most played cards in the format, the majority of them are printed in between Modern Horizons 1 and Modern Horizons 2, and the majority of them are printed in those two sets specifically. So like that's the future. I mean, we've talked a lot about that. My favorite card is not a powerhouse in Modern. If I had to pick one amongst the powerhouses in Modern, I'd probably pick Urza Saga. I think it does a lot more cooler things in a lot of different ways than Ragavan does. Ragavan is just, I also like Ragavan, so like, don't get me wrong. I just think Urza Saga is more interesting, but I put Academy Manufacturer.
Card is really sweet. It's
like really cute. I like that it makes 3, like all the tokens I've even tried making it work in Modern. I think the fact that Ragavan grabs it and is like busted in half when it accidentally grabs your opponent's Academy Manufacturer makes it kind of unplayable because of Ragavan. And if Ragavan was in the format, I'd like revisit it. But it is really cool. And in decks, I do get to play with things like in Commander. I have it in my Eloise deck. It's like it's bonkers. It's a bonkers card.
Yeah, it's an excellent card. When you and I did our first of the streams, which will be coming back, by the way, you guys will be hearing this in the beginning of January. And in January, you guys are going to start to see a stream coming back on Sundays, which is going to be me, probably starting with Alex, but soon to be with other guests, playing Modern. It'll be super fun. We're looking forward to it. And in the very first one we did, the sort of pilot back in whenever that was, November. Yes, we had exactly that scenario. I stole your Academy manufacturer with my Ragavan, and it was excellent. It was wonderful.
Felt bad. Felt bad.
Yeah.
Immediately took apart the deck.
Yeah, it was really cool. Great card, really interesting design. I do think something to point out about Horizons 1 and Horizons 2. So, like, as I said a second ago when talking about card design, Magic's a complex game, and it has tons of variables, but it's also a game that there's only so much you can do in terms of, like, things have to cost 1, 2, 3, 4, 0, 1, 2. Like, you have to be able to hit things on curve. You have to hit your land drops. You are still going to draw 7 cards. There are limitations for how they can design the game. And so if they want to design a bunch of cool cards that are going to be competitive in a format like Modern, their choice is to either balance them to be on the level of what's out there or just slightly above it. But then all that's going to happen is they're going to design things that by and large are competing for space with cards that already exist. And if they're about as powerful, people will often choose to just play with the ones they have already. And they won't be as excited to open those cards because they're not going to feel like they're replacing the things that are good. So what ends up happening is they take ideas that are already good and they push them by at least 5% or 2%. So they are definitely going to be better than the things that are established on curve with the rules that are in place. And they end up taking over the format because that's the only way you can print cards directly that are not going to be in standard to make things interesting, is to try to trump what's out there by at least just a little bit. Because if you don't, it's going to be boring. And it's the only place they're going to see play anyway is in eternal formats. Then you may as well swing for the fences. But I just think that the result of that after 2 times now is that it did the opposite, right? It kind of invalidated like a lot of what was already out there and had already been printed for years that people owned. You kind of have to own Ragavans right now if you want to compete. Like, you sort of have to.
I don't think that's true. There's a ton of really powerful decks that are being played that don't play Ragavan. In fact, Burn's not even playing Ragavans.
Fair. Okay. Well, right. But you understand my point, though.
Yeah.
There are a lot of very expensive cards that are exclusive to those sets that you have to be competitive now.
Sure. Now, one thing I will say, I mean, what Modern Horizons is that I think it was cool that Conspiracy and Battle Bond and those sets were able to print directly into Legacy, and I think Wizards like that. I think it gave them the ability to make cool cards in those formats, and now that Legacy is basically not a real format, and Modern is becoming that, with Pioneer becoming what Modern was, or that's like vaguely was their goal, the Modern Horizon sets became that. And I think like the fact that the Lord of the Rings set that we're getting this year is going to be printed into Modern is a sign that unless this set's like very Commander focused, they're going to be Modern Horizons-esque in that way.
I think it's fair. I think it's totally fair. And I think we had a conversation with someone, I can't remember who it was, about just sort of the different power levels, the various power levels of all the cards in the Horizons set. And I think that the general consensus is that like you could have powered down Ragavan slightly. Like you could have done that. Like it's possible. And I know that that's like internally a conversation that has to have happened, but then the card's just less exciting, right? Like that's it. And like it's the prime example of a card that if you want to have a flagship card that's exciting, I do think that's the future. I do think we're going to see more things like that, and it is just going to keep upping the ante. And I don't think they're going to go in the direction of powering down. Because why would they?
All right, next set is the MTG in the Forgotten Realms, the D&D set. There is a few options here. This is the first full set in a non-Magic property. You had also the flavor text mechanic thing where they started just like using flavor text in the front of different things that different cards did to kind of get those choices. There are a lot of iconic D&D cards. You don't play D&D at all, correct?
I don't. I mean, it's something I'm like loosely aware of as a little kid.
Have you played, or you just like kind of know about it?
Like when I was a little kid, like I would sometimes at synagogue, there was this like one kid who like loved it, and so we would like skip services and play. That happened sometimes when I was really little. Okay. And then like later on, like I had a guy I worked at a bar with in my 20s who loved it. He talked to me about it all the time.
Sure.
So I have some awareness of it. Plus, also, if you've played Magic as long as I have, it's impossible sometimes if you're going to spend that much time in game stores to not just like interact or be around games that are being played, and then you playing D&D. So I have like, but yes, I wouldn't call myself someone who like knows what's up.
So I like really this year is the first time I've played any extensive D&D ever.
No, I know, but I
okay.
talked to you about it like quite a bit. You were like doing it, and I was like sad that I wasn't invited. And then you were like, "I'll invite you," and then I did never come. So
you don't have time to do anything. Not that I have time. Yeah. So I'm gonna go with you've said your favorite card first a few times. Mine was Oswald Fiddlebender. This is the one in a white
this card is sweet.
artifact birthing pod. This card's really dope. I've gotten to play it in modern decks. I've gotten to play it in other formats. I've gotten to play it as a commander. It's birthing pod, but for artifacts. I don't know if anyone ever saw this card. I was like, Alex Kessler is going to not like this card. This card's great. I love it so much. It does everything I want a card to do.
Fiddlebender's sweet. I mean, this card, yeah. I think I'm sort of surprised that Pyre of Heroes didn't make it for you. I thought that card was going to be more you. I know you love those like toolbox, search your deck for a thing types of cards. It's like one of your favorite.
Because it wasn't good anywhere.
Yeah, I know. We were excited about it when it first got spoiled. But Fiddlebender I've played against you and you've played this card. It's great. It's fun. It's got a great name. Phenomenal name. Really fun name. I chose a card from this set that is kind of like a forever card that I just think is going to be good forever.
Mm-hmm.
I chose Treasure Vault.
Sure.
It falls in line with a type of land that I'm a big fan of. So like utility lands that come into play tap, even if they're insanely powerful, I just don't care about. I don't ever want to play a land in a deck that comes into play tapped if I can help it. I will make the exception occasionally for like a Celestial Colonnade type of card, but even then, like, I just don't like it. I don't like it because I like to play things that are cheap. I like to play things that cost 1, and I never ever want to be in a situation where my only land is a tapped land and I have a 1-drop and I have to throw the hand back because of it. Ever. I would always way rather have cantrips that cost 1 and all my lands come into play untapped, so I can always gamble on a 1-lander if I have to.
Sure.
Granted, Treasure Vault only produces colorless mana when it comes into play untapped, so it's not like I have a lot of colorless 1-drops, but I still think that it coming into play untapped fits in with what I like. And I just like cards like this where there's not a lot of downside. And if you put this into certain decks and you get to the middle of the game and any kind of scalable spell, this thing just goes bonkers. It just goes bananas. You just end of turn double your mana all of a sudden. I mean, you're down a land, obviously. You lose the Treasure Vault to do it. But even so, like you get up to, you're hitting your land drops and you're in a stalemate and all of a sudden you go from, having nine lands available to all of a sudden you untap and you've got 12 mana. Like it's just big. It's big game and you don't really suffer much by having it. I think format to format, it's something that's going to always have a place. Like I know there's a modern deck long term that there will be a modern deck that this will be bonkers in.
It's the fact that it's an artifact land is enough, right? Like it's going to be its biggest. Yeah, the one card type. So the one mechanic that I will say I was close in picking was the classes. I really love the class mechanic. I've played Cleric class, Wizard class, and Warlock class a lot in different formats, and they both are just very cool and how powerful they are and how they're engines. I do wish that you could do it at instant speed versus sorcery speed, but even then, I think that what they do is really cool, and I like them playing in spaces like that as different type of enchantments.
Yeah, I would say probably of the sets, this might have been the one that I felt missed the most. It was the one that I maybe was the least interested in, perhaps. Okay. And I wonder if it's partly because of just the fact the D&D thing, and it's just not something I was familiar with.
But all you care about is numbers and rules text. You don't care about flavor.
I mean, there was a lot of there was a lot of rules text in this set. There was a lot. There was a lot of small print. This was another in the long line of what ended up being a year of a tremendous amount of text on cards. And I don't know. Look, sometimes certain sets, they do it for you, and other times they just don't. And there were cards in this set that stood out that I think are cool. Some of the lands I really like in the set. I think in general, the lands are probably my favorite part about this set. But and actually, in dungeons are pretty cool. I do think
that was the one mechanic we haven't touched upon. Dungeons were really cool. I did really like them. I don't think they're modern exciting, but they were a cool mechanic. I think one of them they could have hit a little bit harder on. But otherwise, yeah, they're sweet.
But yeah, I think that was my general feeling. I mean, again, I don't think when you're talking about sets that are straight up bad, you're talking about a Cold Snap or a Homelands, we're not talking about sets like that. Like this was not a year of anything like that.
All right. Next set on the list is we've rotated. I want everyone to get headspace. Summer's over. Sets are rotating. All of the sets. Eldraine's no longer in standard. Jumpstart Horizons happen. We don't really worry about that. We're going back to the creepiest place. The happiest place on Earth that's also creepy. And that's Innistrad. We're back on Innistrad. We're in Innistrad Midnight Hunt. 2 sets. First time there's been 2 sets in this period of time. So we're going to have 2. There's the first one, which is there's a festival going on, but the werewolves are getting spicy. Flashback's back. Spirits also have flashback. That's what I got to say about it.
I wonder if we chose the same card. I'm waiting for us to pick the same card in one of these sets. This would be the one that I would have. This is the one that I would guess that we would pick the same card. This is a card that I know you liked, but I don't think either one of us slapped the label on as maybe the best, if not like top couple options when the set was previewed. I know we both liked it. You especially liked it. And now it has shown to be one of the best cards in the set. It is the blue-white Faithful Looting called Faithful Mending.
So I had 2 cards written down. I was going to put Faithful Mending, and then I was like, Faithful Mending or is that my favorite card that I've got to cast? I'm really happy that Faithful Mending exists, though. So we can continue on how sweet that card is. I was pretty high. I think it was my number 1 pick for the set.
No, you were excited. I mean, yeah. I remember I missed it more than you did when we did the preview on this. But I also think this card has way overperformed from what people thought it was going to be. Like, I think this card is like a player. The thing that's so good about this card, and this is something that I've really learned over the years, is like, so life gain in general is something that like most seasoned Magic players kind of turn their nose up at. I mean, if it's attached to something, if you have a really good creature that has lifelink, or if you have a really good ability that also gains you life, it tends to be a little bit more like acceptable. But like, people don't usually rate life gain when it comes to like the quality of a card very highly. It's usually kind of a throwaway. But I think there's 2 things about this card that are really strong. The first part is, it turns out instant speed Faithless Looting in a blue-white deck is good enough anyway. It just is. Like, it obviously is not as powerful as 1-drop sorcery speed. Flashes back for the same cost. But the fact that you gain 2 life both times means that by the time you're done resolving the spell and getting through it, especially because it's instant speed, so you can hold mana open to do it, the 4 life you gain by casting this thing twice is actually meaningful. Like, it's actually a significant gain in a game to put you up on the clock if you guys are trading in some way. That I do think that the 4 life you gain, kind of the fact that it's instant speed and 4 life kind of balances out the fact that Faithless Looting sorcery speed only costs 1. They're like,
well, and it being an instant, right? Like, those 2, like it being an instant, and then, hey, Sphinx's Revelation taught all of us that gaining incremental life is good. It lets you stabilize in ways. Like, it in many ways it reads like take an extra turn. It's your last turn, but sometimes that's enough. Yeah, so I like the life gain is just going to be strong. Like, life gain is good when it's attached to something that is already decent, right? That's when life gain pushes something from like decent to great, and often because it's a stabilizing effect.
Agreed. Yeah.
Yes, Faithful Mending might be the most powerful card in the set. It might, in the long run, actually be my favorite. But I did want to pick what I think the coolest card in the set is. And that is Lier, Disciple of the Drowned.
Lier, Disciple of the Drowned.
Yeah, 3 blue, human wizard, legendary creature, 3/4. Spells cannot be countered.
Oh yeah, this card.
Each instant and sorcery card in your graveyard has flashback. Have you gotten to have this card in play under your control and untapped?
No, I have not actually. This set came out just in the time that my health was deteriorating, so I hadn't really gotten to play with this card. But I definitely remember us talking about this when it was previewed.
So like, have you had Omniscience in play in front of you?
Yes.
It feels like that. I'm not, and like, you feel like you don't have unlimited mana, but you feel almighty and powerful, and there's nothing anyone can do to stop you. Like, being able to cast any card from your graveyard with flashback, regardless of its cost, like obviously in decks that can do storm things is like bonkers, but just doing middling, if you have like 5 mana and you untap with 5 mana and every card in your graveyard has flashback and you can cast 3 spells off of this, you feel mighty. And the fact that on top of that, your opponent can't counter any of those spells.
Well, do you remember that card? Was it Dralnu Lichlord?
Yes.
The blue-black one?
That was bad Snapcaster Mage, right? Like you tapped it to give target
card. Yeah, exactly. It's like so much worse than this.
Yeah.
It's like astonishing, and it's blue-black. That's where you see, when people talk about power creep and they talk about like different eras of design, that's exactly what this card is, right? This card costs the same thing as that card. It's mono blue, also legendary. Spells can't be countered, and then it's each instant and sorcery card, and it doesn't have any of the weird lich stuff that goes along with Dralnu. So this card is very, very good.
Definitely not the most powerful. I think Faithless Mending is the best card in the set, but I do think it's really cool.
Yeah. So for the final set, the most recent set, I picked kind of a funky card. I know this card is seeing a little bit of play. This is a card, again, most all the cards I picked were cards that I like, and also cards that I think long term I expect to have a place. Like I sort of like favorite in the sense that I'm happy they exist. That's kind of the way I approached all the cards. So the card I picked is Dig Up. 1 green sorcery. It has Cleave of green, black, black 1. So you may cast a spell for its cleave cost. If you do, remove the words in square brackets. Search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, put it into your hand. But if you remove the brackets, then it's search your library for a card, put it into your hand, and shuffle your library. So for black, black, green 1, it is Demonic Tutor. And for 1 green, it's search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, put it in your hand. I like this card for a bunch of reasons. I like this card because anytime a card allows you to play multiple colors while also doing something cool, I think it's a win for Magic. Like, I think this is exactly the kind of thing that's good, whereas something like Astrolabe is not. If that makes sense? Like, both cost 1, both things fix your mana. One of them is busted. One of them is like a fun Magic card that I'm glad exists. I'm really happy that a search your library for a basic land card for 1 green, that if I draw this in the middle of the game as a Demonic Tutor, is something that now exists in Magic. I think it's great design. I think it's strong. I think it's one of the best uses of Cleave. One of the simplest uses of Cleave. It's restrictive also in the fact that it's double black on a green card. So you do have to be committed. But I think
it's Diabolic Tutor, right? It's like literally that.
Yeah. Except for without green. But yeah. But yes.
Yeah. So I think Crimson Vow, like, we'll see where we end up, right? Like, give it time, and it might have a Shadows over Innistrad effect where just like weird random cards from this set are more powerful than people give them credit for right now. I think this is my least favorite individual card set of the year. Like, when I was going through it trying to pick my favorites, like, I kind of don't love anything. Like, the fact that Odric is like one of my favorite cards in this set is like and that card's like fine. He's like very cool, but almost more like I just wanted to argue with the internet.
Yeah.
And like the commander deck I built around him was very sweet, but like and could see some amount of modern play in like an Affinity Shell. But like, yeah, it was one of the ones that was like most disappointing to me. My favorite card's Hullbreaker Horror, which is just like the flavor of Hullbreaker Horror, the fact that it is actually the Thing in the Ice. Right, it's the same artist. I don't know if you know this, like Thing in the Ice. So Hullbreaker Horror is Thing in the Ice.
Okay,
it's what Thing in the Ice becomes. It's the same artist. It has the same. It looks the same. It's the same power and toughness of the creature on the backside of Thing of the Ice.
Oh, this giant card! I love this card. Yeah.
Is cool from a flavor perspective. Love that callback. The fact that it's like Venser on like tons of performance enhancing drugs and like just does so many things. It's obviously really, really powerful. It's really cool, and I think it's like relatively considered the best card in the set, and it's a 7-drop. I'm a big fan.
That's rare. Yeah, I mean, I think, look, we've only seen a couple previews so far of Neon Dynasty, and we'll talk about that more as we get into probably next week.
Yeah.
But I will say that it looks like what I've seen so far looks awesome and makes me it's weird because we are going back to a plane that existed before, but it's been so long and I hated the original plane so much that there's no part of me that's like thinks that this is going to feel like old Kamigawa. Whereas we've got a lot of Innistrad and I love Innistrad. Like classic Innistrad is one of the best sets of all time. but I kind of felt like this was a little overkill. Kind of in the same way that in some ways I feel like Ravnica is a little bit overkill now. Like I don't need to go back to Ravnica for a while.
Sure.
I'm kind of done with it.
Sure.
Like there are certain things, and look, sometimes you swing for the fences on something new, like Kaldheim, and it's not my favorite, right? There are some sets that they go for it, and I feel like they achieve something really cool. Ikoria is one that I want to go back to Ikoria. Like I think Ikoria is really awesome.
I think of the last 2 years, Ikoria and Strixhaven are my two favorite sets.
You know, and Ikoria I had issues with the templating in the text when it first was, because I remember because Mutate, I was like, what is this? Like how do you, and then like, very quickly it made sense, but like definitely
is problematic in the corners, right?
Yeah.
It's fine on its face. It's just when you start thinking too hard about it that it starts being weird.
Yeah, but I definitely think that this time returning to Innistrad period felt like underwhelming for me, and then this most recent set, like I almost just didn't need to have two. I guess maybe that's the
here's where I'm at. I'm actually really excited to draft and play double feature, because double feature feel like these sets together, having blood tokens along with flashback, that format sounds sweet. Like I am so hyped to play all these cards together. And I will say I did like the story of Crimson Veil, right? I do like the vampire wedding. That I think is really cool. And so there's like stuff from the Innistrad return that I love. There's stuff that like maybe just like Limited wasn't that fun, and I loved Limited so much more out of Shadows of Innistrad, Eldritch Moon, and Original Innistrad. That's really where my like negative vibes are. But otherwise, I think the sets, I think in like hindsight, but maybe like it's kind of to your point, like the return to Zendikar felt small. Like I did not like that. That was another one where like the set now in the hindsight, like the double faced cards, the best variant of those was the lands, right? Like that Zendikar probably had the best version of modal double face cards.
100%. Like the double face stuff out of that Zendikar set, like all, and that goes from the lands, double sided lands to double side to like, I mean, land double siders like the duels, but then also just like the commons. Like there's just like a lot of cards from that set that are great. Like I think that design is some of the most fun stuff. And look, I always sort of hate having a critical attitude of Magic sets, because I feel like I know we know these people who make these cards. Like they're good friends of ours. We know how much time and effort and energy goes into it. And I know they care about it. I know they're excited about it. It would be the same thing as somebody coming to me and saying, hey, of the last 7 songs you released, here's the 2 that I like. This one's okay. These 2 are pretty bad. And I'd be like, what do you mean they're bad? I'd be like, I mean, I understand that maybe they weren't for you, but like that meant a lot to me when I made it. Like that was something special to me. And like, I would hate for anyone who's making these cards to feel like that I felt that way about the thing they created that they loved. But I also think that when it comes, we have to be honest, like you can't just like say everything's roses.
Well, I think like I love when people give me feedback on battle bosses. When someone's like, oh, I really loved how Nightmare played, and I loved how Dock Explosion played, but Grakthar was really boring, and this isn't true of these bosses. All the bosses are great, but like like I like the notes, especially because like we're designing the next 6 bosses, and me learning from our last ones and what was worked and what's different. I think that's one of the reasons Wizards is so open with the community on an individual creator basis, right? Like Andrew as a Fallen Gavin goes out to the community and talks to them because they get a lot of feedback. One of the reasons we're returning to Kamigawa is because of the conversations that Wizards employees had with the community, and the community being like, no, we love Kamigawa as a set and a theme. The problem with the original set was just so powered down after Mirrodin, plus the like Legendaries Matter theme wasn't something you guys had a grasp on, and Legendaries didn't matter at that point. Like now they do, right? Like, so I think that I'm really excited for Neon Kamigawa. Like that set looks so up my alley and fire. And I think there will be a little bit of a hark back to the old stuff plus a bunch of new stuff. I think there might be a cool, like based on the story we've heard so far, like an old versus new, like relationship where they're going to be like, there's going to be a part of the society that's like, this is like what the old world was like, and that's going to be like old Kamigawa, and then there's going to be all of the new neon signs, futuristic stuff. So I'm pretty hyped to see like what Magic's take on the future is, which is going to be cool as well. I think my favorite set was Strixhaven by like a wide margin. I think after that, I really did like the Innistrad sets, though they're probably my third favorite of the times we've gone there. And I do just like, I'm excited for New Worlds. I am really excited to go back to New Phyrexia. That's like the one return. I'm like, yes, let's do it. And then Dominaria next year is going to be really cool.
I can't believe we're going back to Dominaria already. It's so wild to me that was already a few years ago that we were there. It's just, I don't know why this happens to me every few years. Every few years, when it's like, we're going back, I'm like, we were just there. And somebody will be like, that was like 3 or 4 years ago.
Well, like there's two parts of that, right? There was like 8 years between the first time and the second time we were at Zendikar. And then there was like 4 years between the second and the third, right? There's like, we are going to more sets every year, therefore returns are happening quicker. But I think it's the beginning of the Dominaria story, right? Like, or the New Phyrexia story is we're going to go to Dominaria, and then there'll be a flashback to the Brothers' War, which is going to be what the fall set is. And it'll be like another 2-part feature on like what's happening. And I wouldn't be surprised if by next spring we're at New Phyrexia.
Okay, gotcha. Wow, next spring. Like spring, April, this coming year.
No, because New Capenna is this April.
Got it. Okay, you're saying,
which like also looks really cool. I think there's like a lot of cool stuff we'll find out on New Capenna as well. Like I think that's like Elspeth is going to be on that set. We're going to learn a lot of cool stuff there. Yeah, but I think the next year is a big like let's learn about the past and how that affects the future.
Sweet. Well, I'm excited to talk about it. Hopefully we'll have some awesome previews that we can break down for next week. I think that's going to wrap up our best cards and best sets of 2021 episode. Happy New Year to all of you.
And a look into the future. We talked a little bit about that. So yeah. So today's episode, 2021 in review, and a first look at 2022 in Neon Kamigawa.
Yes.
Get those keywords into the title. All right. Thank you, everyone. Welcome back, Ben. It's great. I'm going to go take a bunch of Claritin, and we will talk to everyone next week. Thank you so much. Happy New Year.
Bye, guys.
This has been a production of Time Traveler Media, sending podcasts into the future.